Okay, maybe we'll get started now. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Anne. I'm a member of CORE, Communicating Research Effectively, and we're going to have a great workshop today with Jessica. And Jessica Kendall-Bar received her bachelor's degree in marine science and integrative biology at UC Berkeley and is now a PhD candidate in marine mammal physiology and neuroscience at UC Santa Cruz. Her research explores new techniques to monitor sleep in wild marine mammals. Beyond that, she's a big believer in science communication, and she's a great artist that uses her illustrations, photography, animations, and cinematography to effectively portray her research. So she's also she's illustrated 2 children's books, and she has been a part of the Coastal Resilience Lab at UCSC, where she's been able to present work that has reached top-level decision makers in the US and Pacific and Indian Ocean nations. And she aims not only to continue to make meaningful discoveries in science, but also to convey these results broadly and creatively to impact diverse populations within and outside of academia. So with that, thank you, Jessica, for leading this workshop.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. This is designed to be super informal. I'm going to be basically jumping between the presentation mode in PowerPoint and then the back side of PowerPoint to show you all the tips and tricks that I found out through YouTube tutorials and friends. And I'm hoping that we're all able to advance somewhat. So let's see. So this workshop is going to go over sort of the basics of digital art, the difference between vector and raster graphics, some general digital art tips to keep in mind when you're working on a screen, some design basics, so talking about how to choose colors for your presentations, how to design your slides, and then some built-in tricks that PowerPoint has that you may or may not know about. And then we'll go into actually creating animations to go with your science graphics. So we'll be using really simple, not the obnoxious, bounce animations that used to always frustrate people, and they were just clicking through their animations to get through them as fast as possible. We're going to try to be really purposeful about what animations we choose to incorporate into our slides and make sure they're all serving a purpose. So at any point, if you guys have questions about how I did something, it's especially hard because I might be holding down keys that you can't see. So if something goes by and you've missed it, just ask me to repeat it or explain it slower. And then I'll finish up just by really briefly talking about 3D animation in PowerPoint. It's a new feature and it obviously has some bugs, but I think it's really cool to be able to show a 3D model in PowerPoint, something that I didn't even know existed a month ago. So I'm just gonna jump in. You all filled out a little survey when you signed up for the workshop. So I made a little graph of where you feel you are. Tried to take keywords from each of your responses, and it seems like everybody's pretty comfortable, or the majority of people are pretty comfortable in PowerPoint. They've had some experience using it for science presentations, but they may not feel like they're taking full advantage of the software, except for those advanced people. So this may be a review for some of you, but be patient for everyone to the left of you. So our goal is to make everybody in the basic and comfortable zones feel like they can do something to get to the next level with their presentations. So to start out, there's 2 types of graphics. There are raster graphics and vector graphics. Raster graphics are composed of pixels. So if you were to zoom in infinitely on a raster graphic, you would eventually see that each of those clean curves from a zoomed out picture, once you zoom in, is just a pixel approximation of that curve. Whereas if you zoom into a vector graphic, you see the mathematical equation that created that curve. So it remains really, really crisp. So whenever possible, you want to keep your graphics in vector graphic format. And then when you get to the point of creating a PowerPoint, that's okay to sort of compress it back into raster space, but you want to be really cautious because if you were to enlarge your raster graphic that you spent hours on in Photoshop and you found out you needed to use it in a poster presentation, for example, so you needed it to be 1 foot across, that could lose some resolution and make your image fuzzy. But raster graphics do have the advantage of allowing you to paint. So in Photoshop, you can create really beautiful shading and highlights that would be really complex to create in a vector graphic software. So there are examples of people doing really advanced things with gradient meshes, where you basically have like millions of different shapes, and each of those shapes has a gradient across that you can achieve pretty realistic shading with vector graphics. But in general, if you want to make something look photorealistic, you want to use a raster graphic format. In terms of the programs that are available to you, you can use Adobe Photoshop for a raster graphic. I think that's probably the best program. And now that UCSC has a free license, we really have no excuse. GIMP is okay. You can do a lot of the same things that you can in Photoshop, but it still doesn't have quite the same capabilities. I use Procreate when I work on my iPad, and that allows you to draw on the go. And I really like the interface of Procreate, but I've actually started to use the Adobe Photoshop app for iPad as well, which they recently improved. Before it was really bad, and now it's pretty good, and you can also have many more layers than you can have in Procreate, which I appreciate. And then for vector graphics, you have Adobe Illustrator and Inkscape. Inkscape is open source equivalent, so it's free. But again, if we have access to Adobe, I would definitely suggest you becoming familiar with Adobe Illustrator. I find it much more intuitive than Inkscape, but Inkscape has pretty much all the functionality in Illustrator. In terms of file types, your raster graphic formats are JPEGs, TIFFs, and PNGs. I usually use PNGs if I'm putting anything into PowerPoint because they have transparent backgrounds and they don't take up a lot of space when you save your file. In terms of vector graphics, there's SVGs, EMFs, EPS, and PDFs. A lot of confusing acronyms. I usually stick with PDFs because you can open them in Illustrator, you can open them in PDF, and they're pretty flexible. But just make sure that you're not saving, you're still saving a vector graphic into your PDF. Sometimes with certain softwares, it'll save a raster graphic into your PDF. Or another file type is .ai, and that's the file type of Adobe Illustrator files. So you can transform a vector graphic into a raster graphic by rasterizing. So there's a comment in the chat about iPad apps. Again, I didn't like the Adobe Photoshop app for a while, but they just recently improved it a lot, and I think it's pretty good now. So yeah, you can turn a vector graphic into a raster graphic by basically burning it into pixel space and rasterizing it. But be careful because once you do that, you should really be sure that that's your final image size or it's not going to grow any bigger. And then you can also transform a raster graphic back into a vector graphic using image trace. But the results of this can vary greatly. If you have like an underwater scene, which I work with animals that live in the ocean, so it's often really hard to distinguish the outline of a creature and its blue background. So image trace doesn't work well for the photos of my organisms. So I often have to trace it myself. Inkscape also has an option to trace the bitmap, which is basically the same thing. creating a vector graphic from a raster graphic. It does, however, work pretty well if you have like a really simple drawing that was created on white paper with black ink. And it does a pretty good job of turning that into a vector graphic. But what it won't do, so basically it'll look at your image and it will draw outlines around whatever black ink splotches you have. It won't create paths from the middle of your line, for example. So it just depends on how you want to work with whatever you create, but I prefer to sort of just start from the base and trace things in Illustrator. Whenever you're doing digital art, try to be organized. I'm terrible at organizing everything, but I really try to save things with multiple file names and versions. I've started to just name everything I work on with like a V1 and a V2 every time I save it. And that's actually helped me. It's super simple, but it's helped me a lot just to keep track of each change that I've made, assuming that you have unlimited Google Drive storage like we do. And you should also make use of layers. In most softwares, you have a layers panel. And in PowerPoint, you actually have something called the selection pane. So I'm going to show you how to use that. People's faces. So you have the animation pane. You also have something called the selection pane. If it's not showing up for you currently, you can pull it up by going to the arrange icon and then selecting selection pane. This is basically your layers panel in PowerPoint. It allows you to select different objects, which can be helpful. Often when I'm creating animations, I may want to overlay a picture with a different version of that picture. So I'm working with things that overlap each other. And it's pretty hard to select something that's behind. So for example, if we just hide this shortcut table, it allows us to see if there's anything behind it. And in our case, there is a little seal. And then we could select our seal manually at that point, or you can just use the selection pane. You can select multiple objects by selecting one thing and holding down Control, and then selecting another. In Illustrator and most other softwares, you could do that with Shift, but that doesn't work with the selection pane. So then once you have something selected, you could apply an animation to that specific thing. So it can be helpful. So this comment used guidelines, align, and distribute. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of aligning and distributing objects, but if you've ever had to make a graph manually, you may have found yourself trying to make tick marks. So I'm going to make some tick marks. So I've made one little square. It's kind of a big tick mark, but it'll allow you to see what I'm doing. So I have one right now. And instead of copy pasting and creating like 10 that are all sort of randomly distributed, I'm going to instead hold down Control. And then I'm going to click the object, and it allows me to move that duplicate of the object wherever I want. So again, you just click on the object, hold down Control, and then drag the duplicate of the object wherever you want. So what might have taken you a while with copy paste becomes pretty simple if you, if you just duplicate. So if I want to create, say, 10 copies of these, I'm going to create these duplicates. And then every time I do that, I'm trying to like find these red lines. And I don't know if you're like me, but you've probably been driven crazy by these red lines at some point. Just trying to get them to appear. You want like the most possible. And then every once in a while you hit like bullseye and all of them appear. So instead of doing that, when you're duplicating, you can hold down Control, drag to the new location. And if you only want to move it horizontally or vertically, you can also hold down Shift. And that will make it so that you can only move it horizontally, or you can move it vertically, but you can't mess up and put it somewhere over here. So I'm just going to quickly make a bunch of these with those shortcuts that I just showed you. I love the reactions in the chat box. Okay, so now I have a bunch of tick marks and they're all in a line, which is great. But imagine that I wasn't so talented and I just had a bunch kind of just scattered and I was getting super frustrated and I couldn't remember the duplicate, shift, whatever shortcuts. There's also another trick that you can use. So you select every single tick mark, and the way that selection works in PowerPoint is you have to completely surround the objects that you want to surround. But that has the added advantage of not selecting things that you're only partially selecting. So for example, there's this text box called shortcuts that I'm not selecting right now. So if I just release, it won't select shortcuts, but it'll select all of these tick marks. So then I want them all to be arranged horizontally. So first I'm going to align them all to the top. So again, that's in Arrange, Align, and Align Top. I could also align them to the bottom of all those tick marks, but right now they're all in a line, so it's just not going to do anything. And then once they're all aligned vertically, I'm going to make sure that the spacing in between each tick mark is uniform. So the way to do that is to distribute them horizontally. And that will save you a whole bunch of time because you don't have to do what I used to do, where you're like, you're doing this, right? And you're like, oh, I got all the little arrows. So no longer, just select them all and then align them, distribute them horizontally. All right. Cool. So that's helpful. There's also a whole bunch of other shortcuts that you can use. These are sort of the equivalent shortcuts in all of these different softwares. And honestly, don't worry if you can't remember these shortcuts. I forget them all the time, but as long as you know what they're called, that's really the key thing. So that will sort of launch you into YouTube tutorials that are actually going to help you. So if you forget how to duplicate an object in PowerPoint, you can just search duplicate and it'll tell you how to do that in whatever software you're working with. And again, whenever you're struggling with something, I just hold Shift and see if it's going to solve my problems. It usually helps lock things into place, like in After Effects. We're doing a workshop next week. And in After Effects, if you hold Shift, it will basically snap to align whatever clips you're trying to align. So just try holding down Shift and see if that solves your problems. So moving on, other little tricks, you can change the color of your images to match your theme. So what you can do is you can make your images whatever color you want. And these seven suggestions here are all determined by the colors in your theme. Maybe the blue seal is silly, but maybe you have, I don't know, a picture with really obnoxious colors and you'd like to just fade in a little bit more. So all of these pictures here are determined by the colors that are in your theme. And I'll show you in a bit how to change the colors that are in there. You can edit curves and lines in shape objects, just like in Illustrator or Inkscape, by converting it to a shape first. So I've already done that with this. So you can see if you're ever confused about what type of object you've selected, you can just select it and see what kind of menu it gives you for format at the far right. So this is a shape format, or sorry, this is a shape, and it allows you to edit the shape and edit the points within that shape. So you can either find that there or right click and edit the points in your shape, and then you can change the shape of your elephant seal to be something ridiculous. So that's helpful. I still personally don't like it as much as Illustrator because in Illustrator, I find myself wanting to say align these 2 points and make them the same height. And I haven't found a way to do that in PowerPoint yet, but if anyone comes up with it, let me know, and then it will be my favorite software. I wouldn't remove the background of images in PowerPoint. I personally never get good results. So if I tried to, give me something not great. And you can struggle with this for as long as you want. And it's pretty difficult. So I often just use Photoshop or GIMP to do things like that. But again, if you have something that's black and white, it could be pretty easy. You may have noticed I have these like these lines on my slide that are kind of wavy. It's my new favorite thing about PowerPoint is you can add a sketched outline to your shapes if you want them to look hand-drawn. I don't know, maybe it's silly, just ways to waste time. But you can, when you're adjusting your outline, you can make it sketched, you can make it like super sketchy or not very sketchy. Sometimes if you sketch it too severely, it will become divorced from its actual shape, which may not be ideal. But I don't know, something interesting maybe. Selection pane, we already went over that, and the duplicate, align, and distribute so that you're not struggling with these red dashed lines. All right, when you're choosing colors, you can talk about the color's value. That's where it falls on the spectrum from light to dark. I find that I can see white text better if it's on a dark background, obviously. So just make sure that there's enough contrast between your text and your background. I would avoid oversaturated colors and usually select something about at this level of saturation. And of course, there's also the color. I would stick to only about 3 hues, something sort of relaxing for the background, and then an accent color to bring attention to whatever you want to bring attention to. Should I may come back to those questions in a bit. So this is an example of a color palette that I selected for this infographic with all these elephant seals. So I have sort of the background colors and then this accent color. I find that it helps to sort of relax, but also focus attention. When you're designing your slides, I like to display an outline at the bottom of my slides. I didn't for this slide, just this presentation, because I have so many graphics. But typically I think it helps people follow along. I would keep your text to a minimum, use graphics as much as possible. Make sure that you are not surprised by your slides. I'm sure you've all had that professor who's like, I don't know how that got in there. So make sure that you know what's in your slides. So similarly, as you would stick to only 3 colors, I would stick to only 3 fonts, and just is confusing when there's too much going on. Some tricks: you can navigate to any slide by typing in the number of the slide and pressing enter. So instead of going through all of your animations for all of your slides, you wanted to go to the first slide. So I just press 1 and enter, and it takes me to the first slide. And then if I wanted to go back, I wouldn't remember this normally, but I know that it's slide number 10 because I wrote it on the slide. If you want to be able to keep track of your slide numbers, you can either print out an outline of your slides or put page numbers on your slides. You can also right click while you're presenting to show all of your slides. If your audience is like, I think I remember there was some slide I wanted to ask a question about, you can do that. You can press F5 to begin your presentation at the beginning. So instead of finding this little tiny icon at the bottom of your screen, sometimes it's hidden, especially if you're sharing your screen. You can just click F5, or if you want to start at the current one, you press Shift F5. And then there's also something called the slide master. If you're making a PowerPoint presentation for something like your dissertation that you know you're going to be using for 7 years and you're going to be changing it up a lot, but you kind of want to keep the same theme, the same organization, you can use the slide master to save some time. You can find it by going into View and then Slide Master. And it'll bring you to this place where basically you have your own themes, and you can control those themes. So this is the theme that most of my presentation's in. So it has this like little sketchy line. It has these titles that can be edited whenever. And then I have another theme down here that I've copied a couple of slides from it. I've copied those slides and pasted them into this presentation, and it'll bring that whole template, that whole theme into your presentation when you do that. So for this, I have this text box at the bottom that isn't editable. So you see the dotted lines here. That means that you can edit the text on each slide. This you can't edit. It's going to be on every single slide that you choose to follow this format, which can save you a lot of time. If, say for me, I wanted to have sort of a template for each digital art slide, and a template for each PowerPoint slide, and a template for each vectors slide. So by sort of fixing those, I don't have to edit. Say, eventually I have 30 PowerPoint slides. All I would have to do, maybe I decided that I didn't like the color of PowerPoint and I want it to be like red instead. So that would be a terrible choice, but whatever, I wanted to change it to black. That would update each of the 30 slides that had this PowerPoint template set up. And I would only have to change these 3 different slides to change it on my whole presentation. But this is super powerful. So if you were to change the font style, for example, on this slide, the master of the master, so it's like the parent of everything, you can see that everybody's parented to it. If you were to change your font there, that could mess up your whole presentation because it would change all of the fonts that were in that theme. So just be careful. And if you're ever struggling, you can always just change the layout of that slide. So I could change it to fit another theme or just a blank slide. And then it won't take those formatting changes. When you embed videos, there's a couple things to keep in mind. You need a separate animation. So when you first embed a video, it doesn't actually play. You need to press next to have it play. So you would need to add an animation to make it play as soon as you show the slide, or else you might be fumbling for the play button, like I'm sure we all have at some point. So to add a play button or to add the play animation, instead of just pressing play here, that will overwrite any animation that you've applied to it. So say you have the video appear before it plays. If you were to just press play, it would overwrite the appear animation and would just put the play animation. So to make it play, you would want to add an animation. In my case, maybe I want it to disappear at some point. And that animation will show up in my animation pane. And I can make that happen at the end of the slide. So it's after all of the other animations. You can also crop the video to whatever shape you want. I don't know, I picked this shape. Sometimes I think that the circle looks a little bit better than just keeping it in a square frame. Again, you can decide how useful it is to you. I wouldn't go too crazy, but some of these might be helpful for you. And then, so we're all doing these virtual presentations right now. So when you're sharing videos, you want to be careful that you're sharing everything that you're intending to share. So for Zoom, when you're sharing your screen, and you're going to be sharing a lot of videos, like videos with audio, I would probably recommend checking Optimize Share for full screen video clip. Right now, I don't have that activated. It decreases the resolution of the screen share pretty significantly. So if I do that right now, I don't know if you can tell, but it decreases right then. So again, maybe not the end of the world for you, but I mean, right now I'm looking at the screen share and it looks pretty bad. So something to keep in mind. But the advantage of that is that it's not going to lag. So if I wanted to show this video with sound, which and basically that video doesn't lag. You are probably seeing my screen with a bit of a delay too. So like, I don't know how to demonstrate that, but I can see that it's maybe updating like 2 or 3 seconds after I'm moving my mouse. So definitely something to keep in mind if you're bothered by that, but it does keep the video playing continuously. So I'm actually going to stop optimizing my share for full screen video clip. But I still have, oh, and it also does this thing where all of your Zoom controls are like blacked out or grayed out, which might be annoying at some point. I don't know, especially if you have like a big window that's covering the video, it can be annoying. So if I uncheck that, another thing is I'm sharing my computer sound right now, and I don't know if this happens to you, but for me, when I share my computer sound, the default in Zoom is that all of your computer's notifications are turned off in terms of sound. So I can't actually hear the video that I just played, which is a little bit awkward because you don't really know if it's working. So I'm just kind of looking at your faces to figure out if it's working. So something to keep in mind if you're using share computer sound. Okay. So we have this. Okay. Now on to the animations. So I think the biggest tip and caution is just like make sure you don't overuse animations. It can be really frustrating for the audience and probably yourself too. So you use the animation pane and the selection pane. I can show you how to arrange them with respect to each other. So if you go to animations, this animation that I'm using right now is just appear. So that's an instantaneous where it just appears onto the screen. But if you had a more complex animation or just longer animation like wipe, you can control how those animations come up on screen. So right now I'm animating this text box by paragraph. So it will come up one bullet point, then the next, then the next. Or you could choose for them all to animate together. It's your choice. And then you can arrange them with the animation pane. If you press after previous, it will basically have each animation happen directly after the other. You can have them all happen at the same time by doing start with previous. Right now, since it has a 0, that means it's going to start the second that you display that slide. What else? We can change the duration. So say your wipe is taking too long, you can make it happen in only 0.25 seconds. If you want to make it really long, you can do that, but maybe you want this one to be shorter. and you want it to end at the same time, so you would increase the delay on that. There's actually a lot of control that you have there, and you'll see that in some of the more complex examples. So I would stick to only using animations when they really help you clarify or emphasize something. There are some animations that are a lot slower, like fade, for example, is kind of a slow animation, especially the transition. Fade takes a really long time. So if it takes too long, you can always just decrease the duration of that transition. And that you can do that for the more complex animations as well. You can split your animations into separate slides. I like to use wipe a lot when I reveal something surprising in my data. I find it's kind of like just how you read. You're going from left to right, and then suddenly you see the trend line change, and it's very exciting, maybe, or maybe it's just what I think. I use appear for bullet points or things I want to happen fast and I don't want to be waiting on them. And then you can use motion paths if it's really important for your slide to show something moving. And I'll show you a couple examples that I think are tasteful. So here are a couple examples. Give me a quick show of hands, I guess, for the people with videos on. How many of you have heard of the morph transition? No? All right, so the morph transition is my favorite thing in PowerPoint. You need to make sure that you have the newest version of PowerPoint. So I think it's 2019 it started. And the morph transition allows you to basically take one slide and turn it into another. And that can be as simple or as powerful as you would like. And so, for example, I have this like 24-hour time period that I'm trying to explain, and it's a little bit busy. So I wanted to zoom in to a 4-hour time period, but I wanted them to still have some sense of where in that 24-hour time period I was. So what I did is I basically created a copy-paste version of this slide, and then just zoomed into the figures and cropped them. And that gives me this transition. So it allows me to zoom in to that time period that I want to focus on. And then I can go in and talk about the sleep patterns that are happening during that time. So you do need to make sure that each slide is similar enough to the next, or else PowerPoint is not really going to know what to do. So for example, if you have something that you want, like, let me just make a shape here. If I wanted this rectangle to change shape in the next one, I would just go to the next one, copy paste it, and I would want to make it small in that one. So you select the slide that you want to morph into, you go to the transitions menu, and if you had no transition applied, then you would select morph, and it would morph that rectangle just like the rest of the slide. But say you have something in one slide that's not in the other. So I have that rectangle in this one, but not in this one. If I morph, it's just going to fade out. And that could be fine for what you want to do. But if it's something that you want to turn into something, just make sure that it's similar enough that PowerPoint can sort of track the object in the first one to the object in the next one. There was a question a while back about changing the direction of the wipe. So if I wanted to animate this with a wipe, right now it's going from bottom to top, and you just go to effect options, you turn it to from left. I often use from left. That's how you do it. So this is an example where I used wipe and also motion paths. So you'll see right now, I first moved the x-axis down a bit to allow space for me to wipe on the next set of data. So by doing this, you sort of create a bit of anticipation, and your eye goes to the spot where the x-axis is moving. And that's actually a technique in animation that helps the viewer sort of track their attention on where you want it to go. So I find it helpful to just say I'm about to show an animation over here, because otherwise they're not even going to enjoy your animation if they're not looking. So then I have the data appear with a wipe. So I'm wiping on this first animal and showing that it was mostly stationary, a little bit calm, not very active. And then the next animal, I'm going to wipe over the top of it, was a wild juvenile, and that animal was slightly more active. So you can really clearly see the difference between each set of data, because I'm taking the time between each one to wipe them on. And then I wipe on the data from the last animal, and you can see that that animal is much more active than the other two. So the way that I did this is, this is my animation pane. So you can see each click, there's 6 clicks that I did for this slide. And if I go to the selection pane, I can see that there's 3 different graphs at the very bottom. So for example, like how I showed you before, if I forget what my second graph was, I can just hide this so that I don't have to move it around to reveal what's underneath it. I can hide it, and then I see, okay, it's the graph with 2 animals, I think, and then yeah, it's that one. And if I hid that one, then I could see the graph with 1 animal. So I'll just show those again. Then next, this is an example where you actually use motion paths and spin to show the motion of an elephant seal swimming to the bottom of the pool. And then I have the animal calming down. It closes its eyes. So that's just me disappearing that picture and then appearing a picture with the eyes closed. And then the animal turns upside down. Again, that's just fading a picture out and fading a picture in. And then the animal goes to sleep. Its brain waves change. It remains in the same position when it's in REM sleep, and then it wakes up and goes to the surface. So for me, that's an essential part of my research, is to show that that animal is moving. So that's the only reason why I would spend so much time on an animation like that. It's pretty complicated. There's like this dive path that takes the animal down to the bottom of the pool. There's this spin that makes it so that it's pointed towards the bottom of the pool as it's diving. And then there's another spin that shows it leveling out at the bottom of the pool. So the way that you arrange these is this one's happening after the other motion path, and then this motion path's happening after this one. And then I'm just moving them around forward and back. You can do that with delay or just by right clicking and pressing after previous. So next, to show how to animate your data, I'm going to go kind of from simplest to most complicated. So you can just use built-in animations like this one. So basically, you just insert a chart from Microsoft Excel or PowerPoint. And then when you go to animations and you click wipe, in effect options, it'll allow you to animate by category, by series as one object, by element. I don't even really know what all of these mean, but I just click one and I see if I like it. For this one, I did by category. So basically that's showing me the cost benefits for each year across 30 years. And this is using a different type of graph. So this is a line graph, and it shows the same data, but slightly different. And again, that's just like the built-in animations in PowerPoint, where I just selected wipe. And then instead of doing it by category, I did it by series this time. If you want to get a little bit more creative, you can also create something where basically your X and Y axes are changing over time. So for this one, it took a little bit more time, and I just made 30 different slides with 30 different graphs, and it's just a lot of copy pasting. It didn't actually take me that long. And you're just unchecking a year's worth of data for each slide, essentially. And then you can just apply a wipe transition in between each slide, so that in my case, it kind of just like shoves the data over to the left with each slide. So I'll send these slides out for you to get the instructions later. This is a little bit more involved, but I think a little bit more exciting. So I'm going to be using the morph transition to show the grid lines kind of like coming together. So I don't know if you've ever seen those visualizations of like carbon dioxide over time, and you're just like, the world is ending. And the world is ending at a faster and faster rate. So to demonstrate something like that, you can use the morph transition. Again, you have to be super careful that the graph, so this is one graph that I copy pasted into 5 different slides. You want to make sure that the graph is similar enough in each slide so that these grid lines are going to kind of condense and the text stays the same size. And with each little time period, it shows these infographics as well. And it helps demonstrate, the magnitude that you end up with in 2007. So I have the morph transition between each of those. So I'm probably just going to skip through the step-by-step instructions, but basically I got that data online. I made a vector graphic format. Cleaning it is probably the most time-intensive part because you have to get rid of all the clipping masks that come in a graph. Basically, when you export a figure from R or whatever software you're working with, it'll make sure that each text box in each data series doesn't exceed sort of like its little box. So your data series is hidden outside of that square that it's showing in, and that's called a clipping mask. So sometimes when you want to select something, you have to select it like a million times to select to the very depths of the figure and the clipping mask. Make it pretty, and then make some icons, and then animate with the morph transition. And then when you're done, you can export that animation by creating a video. So in file export, and then you can basically, you have an animation then, an MP4 file that is your presentation. So this is an example of an animation that I made for the Coastal Resilience Lab to kind of show how cool the lab is and how many different collaborators they have. So that was all made in PowerPoint, and then you can export that as an MP4 to share with whoever you want. You can embed videos and export them. So for this one, I have this video to show this one strategy that they use to communicate key results to their stakeholders. Another example of just using super simple animations and also illustrations. So I made these illustrations and I saved them in PNG format so that I'm able to do things like this, where I put an effect around one PNG and I wipe on that title. I wipe on the next title, and then I can create these, like the semblance of me drawing the arrow just by using another simple wipe animation. And you can just bring your figures to life using those techniques. This is an example that shows some data alongside. So this scene is going to be animated throughout this figure. So you're first showing the actual data, and then the image changed to show that the sea star is wasted. and then you're showing the explosion of sea urchins. The image changes again, and there's more urchins now. And then the image changes again to show in the urchin barrens that the urchins are hungry. And then finally, you see the image change again, and you see the little sea otter. So for that one, to keep track of, there's a lot of stuff in this slide, right? There's like 5 different images over here. There's a ton of data, especially since I kept it in vector graphic format. So it was really important that I labeled some things. So at the very bottom, you can see I have these labeled images so that if I want to see the image of the first image where the forest was healthy, I could just hide all of those. That's when your selection pane comes in handy. And the animation pane is also kind of a nightmare to look at. Or you can do sort of more illustrative things. I don't know, like be creative. Now you have the skills to wipe on transitions, use morph or whatever you want. So this is kind of telling that story using the exact same graphics, but just with these, with a full screen image. And most of these animations are such that they'll just play even if I don't press anything. So you can record effect timings so that they'll just have, like, I don't even have an animation on, or sorry, I don't have like a click that initiates the animations on this slide. They all just happen as soon as the slide appears. And that can be helpful if you want to focus on telling your story or whatever and not clicking the whole time. So I don't have a ton of time, but this is just to show you that it's possible to put your 3D model into PowerPoint. Some are more helpful than others. This is like this is a built-in model in PowerPoint. You can animate a turntable for any 3D model, so even the custom 3D models. So you can animate it just spinning for forever if you want to talk about it. This one also has the built-in scene where the water is circulating. This shark swims around your slides. I don't know, maybe that's cool, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's just stupid. But basically the 3D model has like different scenes built into it. This scene 3 is the one where it chomps. And I'm not necessarily saying go use these right now, but I think like maybe keep an eye on them because they might be cool in the future. So for example, like even this super simple one, like a built-in model that's in PowerPoint, you could use this for your fish anatomy lesson, where you describe what fish is what, and what fin is what. And you can imagine more creative uses than this probably. But so the way that I did this transition, for example, is I just used the morph transition. So this 3D model can be moved in any direction. So I made it facing that direction in that slide, and then the next slide, I made it face this direction. So when you apply the morph transition, it turns around for you. You can also import your custom 3D model. So this is one that I made with my brother, and you can move it around. So whatever it is that you want to show, maybe you want to show a cetacean vasculature or something, and you have like a really complex 3D model of all the blood vessels in a dolphin's head. So you could zoom in super close to whatever you want to talk about and explain where it lies in 3D space, even just with the simple ability to morph between different views. Talk about fluke identification, whatever else. This is an example where I use, I'm going to take off the narration, where I use a 3D model to show what the elephant seals do. So I'm using this custom 3D model of an elephant seal to move around, and I'm spinning it, and I have a little turntable. And And again, for me, that's important. And it might be important for you to show the relative motion of your study organism. 3D modeling software. I would recommend either Fusion 360 or Maya. Fusion 360 for sort of more like technical models. Like I use that to model tags, like mechanical engineering stuff. But if you're working on like a whale that you want to sculpt and you sort of want to be able to change how fat its nose is and different finer details, you can do that in Maya more easily. Okay, so now I'm going to finally answer all your questions. But next time I'll be talking about After Effects. After Effects is a super powerful software. This is an example. I'm going to turn off the sound of an animation I made in After Effects where you have some limited 3D capabilities, but you can just have a lot more power and control over how you display each of your graphics. You can do line animation. You can add sound. It's much more an animation software than PowerPoint is. So it just makes those things easier. All right, so for whoever's interested, I can stay here and answer questions that I've been ignoring. If you want to unmute yourself and say something, go ahead.
Jess, that was amazing. This is Terry. So I'm going to be there for the other ones too. But I have a question. When you're talking about the 3D animations, like even, well, for the whale, you did it, but I know that those things are available. So are you saying like you can go online, buy a $45 animation and you can drop it into these PowerPoints and then work with the fades, the spins, etc., and morphing?
Yeah, so you can buy them. There's certain websites like Turbo Squid that have tons of 3D models. Some of them are animated already, and most of them are really cheap, if not free. The like base for this model was kind of expensive because it looks nice. But yeah, you can just purchase a 3D model and then get it into OBJ format and save it in a folder with its texture. And then you can just drop it into PowerPoint. Or if you want to, you can just use one of the built-in models. So if you insert 3D models, you can search in PowerPoint. Again, you can kind of like see how tacky they are. So be careful.
Wait, there's a panda bear. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, some of them are cute. But anyway, if those are helpful, there's like, you know, some medical ones that are better than the other. But otherwise, yeah, buy them online and you can put in any OBJ file into here.
OBJ, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I have a question about your graphs. First of all, this was super fun. Thank you so much for doing this. It's really great. But on your graphs, how did you, because you were like wiping in specific lines and parts of your graph not attached to the axes. So how do you make sure that, yeah, like on that one, on 17, how do you make sure that those are all aligned to your original graph, that like, especially if you like generated it in R and not in Excel or some other software, like how do you keep those integrity of everything?
You can see it's not super easy. You have to like carefully align them using those tools that I was talking about, and then you have to crop each one so that they're fitting the same window. So I basically just copy pasted them into separate slides because I don't know if you remember in my shortcut slide, in most softwares, there's the ability to copy and then paste directly on top of something. But in PowerPoint, every time you paste it, it's like slightly off to the side. So what I did is I first worked with 3 versions of the slide and just made sure it was in the exact same position. And then I cropped one and then copy pasted them back into the same slide. I don't know, it's not super intuitive, but there are ways to struggle through it.
Gotcha, thanks.
Jesse, I can ask a question. This is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for showing us these little tiny details. It is absolutely insane. My mom is joining behind me. I don't know if you saw my comment, but she's seriously blown away. And I'm asking this for her and for me as well. Do you offer any more like in-depth PowerPoint like lessons that we can attend? Because like all what you showed is absolutely fantastic, but I would really love to go a bit more in depth with like each topic, and I don't know if that's available.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think part of the reason why I'm doing this is to show you guys that I'm here doing this stuff and spending a lot of time watching tutorials. And I think that is something that I wish everybody had time to do, but we don't. We definitely don't. And it's so much faster just to ask someone, hey, do you know how to align 2 things? I'm struggling with this. So please, by all means, email me. And I am on Zoom all the time. And I'm happy to just Zoom screen share and help you design whatever you're doing. And I can, if we get the email addresses from the people who attended this session, I can send out a quick email just to people to see how many other people are interested in watching me work through those examples with you.
Seriously, because you seriously just gained 2 new clients, or definitely new students. So thank you, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So yeah, if anyone's interested in doing the next tutorial, what we'll be doing is we're going to be pairing video with time series data. So I work with electrical activity in the brain and seal behavior. So I can show you how to pair that data with whatever your study animal is doing. This is my friend's study animal swimming around and showing its neural activity while it's swimming around, which is super cool. But whatever your data is, maybe you just want to show a pretty video and put some data on top of that. You can do so much in After Effects, and there's a lot of features specific to data-driven animation in After Effects, and I'm really excited to explore that and then teach all of you. So just to get some basic skills, I'm sort of requesting that you guys prepare a data figure that's in any of those vector graphic formats. Basically, you just want to make sure it's transparent, and if you want to animate with any special effects, like you can taper the shape of your line so that it's like really cool and squiggly as it goes along your data. So for that, you would definitely need your data to be in the form of like an Illustrator vector line. And then it's also cool to have a CSV file with your actual data so that you can link like a text box to your data, and that text box can update along with your data to show whatever the current data value is for the time in the video, and then whatever video you want in the background. So I'll be going over that next Friday at 2 p.m. After Effects is an Adobe software, so it's separate, but all the UCSC folks have access to that software as well. Well, yeah, if anyone else has a question, you can ask it now or feel free to email me. and around.
Hi, Jessica. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. I had a similar question about the kelp forest image that you had.
Mhm.
Did you approach it kind of the same way that you approach the graph, where you just are lining things up, or and then also, like, do you have actually like multiple, like, are all of the kelp images individual images, or
Yeah,
I guess
so,
I'm wondering, like, how did you put it together, because it's incredibly impressive. And
yeah, so basically the there's like this background, right? So the background itself is made up of there's like the rocks that are in a separate layer, each of the urchins, well, all of the urchins are in one layer. Then there's urchins in the background that are in a separate layer. So what I did is in Photoshop, I just kind of turned on and off different layers so that I could export a graphic with a transparent background that had whatever I wanted in it. So for example, this Pycnopodia I drew separately, and then I just brought it into the background composition and copy pasted it around everywhere. And that allows me to really flexibly sort of show and hide all of the different Pycnopodia. And I can, if there's enough interest, I can definitely do like a Photoshop centered tutorial as well on how to build compositions and illustrations. But basically, you just have to be really careful and save lots of versions. And I only had to draw a couple things for this. I had to draw one single kelp strand. I had to draw one Pycnopodia that was healthy, one Pycnopodia that was diseased, and one urchin. And then I just copy pasted a lot. And if you keep track of where everything is, it's a lot easier.
thank you.